Dear students, wish you a very good day. Today we are going to start the second chapter of Flamingo Class 12th English Literature, Lost Spring by Anish Jung. Anish Jung was born in 1964 in Rourkela and spent her childhood and adolescence in Hyderabad. She is an Indian women author, journalist, and a columnist for major newspapers in India and abroad, whose most noted work, Unveiling India 1987, was a detailed chronicle of the lives of women in India, noted especially for the depiction of Muslim women behind the parda. Born in Rourkela, Anish hails from an aristocratic family in Hyderabad. Her father, Nawab Hoshiar Jung, was a renowned scholar and poet and served as the Musahib. Musahib means here advisor to the last Nizam of Hyderabad state. Her mother and brother are also noted Urdu poets. After schooling and college at Osmania University in Hyderabad, she went to the United States for higher studies at University of Michigan, where she did her master's in sociology and American studies. Anish Jung's Lost Spring, Stories of a Stolen Childhood, which was written in 2005, focuses on children from deprived backgrounds and includes the story of Idris, a child who is kidnapped and forced to work in the carpet industry in Mirzapur. Others are maltreated by alcoholic fathers or married off early or sexually abused, though some find a refuge in schools set up by well-meaning NGOs. A section of this book is part of the English curriculum in many Indian schools. Jung is noted for her lively and vivid descriptions. Now we will discuss the title of this chapter. The title of the chapter, Lost Spring, is a metaphor used for loss of childhood of millions of child laborers in India. Spring is the best of all the seasons of the year. It is symbolic of joy, happiness, beauty, hope, and prosperity. There is dearth of nothing during this season. Flowers and fruit are abundant in nature. Likewise, our childhood days are also full of joy because all our needs are fulfilled by our parents. We have to care for nothing. This is also called the formative years of our future. It is the best period in man's life, the memories of which one always carry close to one's heart. But alas, this spring is missing from the life of many poverty-stricken children. They have to bear the burden of responsibilities towards their families. They have to contribute in earning daily bread for their families. Hence, the title Lost Spring is justified. The chapter is divided into two parts, continuing the author's first-hand experience with poverty and traditions prevailing in some parts of India. The first part describes the plight of the poor ragpickers of Simapuri. The second part describes the miserable conditions of the bangle makers of Firozabad. Through both these stories, she analyzes the grinding poverty and traditions which condemn these children to a life of exploitation. Now we are starting from the first part of the story of the ragpicker. Every morning the author meets Sahib and his friends scourging for gold in the garbage dumps of her neighborhood. Sahib and his family hail from Bangladesh, but they have left their home a long time ago. Storms washed away their fields and homes, reducing them to a state of abject poverty, which they left behind in the hope of finding a better life. That is why they came to the city looking for gold. Actually, it is not that real gold they are searching for. Instead, they are searching for the source of their livelihood from the garbage dump, and that source is so precious for them that it is compared with gold. The author asks Sahib why he does rag picking and does not go to school. To this, he replies that there is no school in his neighborhood. The author jokingly promises to open a school. After a few days, Sahib asks if the author has opened the school. The author is embarrassed at having made a promise that was not meant to be fulfilled. Nevertheless, she realizes that such promises are made to these children almost every day. These promises are seldom kept. Often they are not taken seriously or have been made on the pretext of retaining a child's fancy for something. This keeps the child hoping for better possibility till he or she realizes the truth. It is difficult for people to shatter the children's dream, while it is also painful to see these children thrive for false hopes given to them. Once, while interacting with Sahib, the narrator ends up encouraging him to study and jokingly talks about opening a school herself. At that time, she fails to realize that unknowingly she has sown a seed of hope in Sahib's heart. She becomes conscious of her mistake when, after a few days, Sahib approaches her inquiring about her school. Her hollow promise leaves her embarrassed. After some months of knowing him, the author asks Sahib his full name. The author notices the irony in Sahib's name, Sahib-e-Alam, which means Lord of the Universe. She feels that Sahib would not believe what his name means. Unaware of the meaning of his name, Sahib roams with his gang barefoot on the streets. The author curiously asks why they don't wear slippers. One replies that his mother does not bring them down from the shelf. Another boy, who was standing just beside him, told that even if she did, he will throw them off. And that boy was wearing shoes that did not match. When the author commented on the mismatched shoes, he felt embarrassed and shuffled his feet, but did not say anything. Another boy who was standing, means the third boy who was standing there, he told that he wanted shoes. Moving across the country, the author saw children walking barefoot in cities on village roads, and it was not lack of money but a tradition to stay barefoot was one explanation. Means they were not holding poverty responsible for staying barefoot. Instead, means they were thinking that it was the tradition for them to stay barefoot, to live barefoot, because they have seen their father, their grandfather and grand-grandfather to stay barefoot, and that's why they were thinking that it was the tradition in their family. They were not thinking that it was the lack of money, it was their poverty, that they were not able to afford shoes for themselves. And this is also the one cause of poverty, perpetual state of poverty. The author remembers a man from Udupi who as a young boy would pass a temple where his father was a priest and pray for a pair of shoes. 30 years later, the author visited his town. Behind the temple there was the house of a new priest. Anis noticed the young boy of the priest who arrived panting. He was wearing shoes. The writer was reminded of the boy who prayed that he should never lose his shoes. The goddess had granted his prayer, as most of the young boys were now have shoes to wear. As against this, the rag pickers in the author's neighborhood still remain barefoot. Thus, through these stories, you try to understand that there are different stratas of society. There are some stratas of society as those of rag pickers who do not want any development, any progress in their life. They are so comfortable in their state of poverty that they don't want any upliftment. They hold tradition responsible for their condition, and these type of people don't make any progress in their life and live in the perpetual state of poverty. While in another story of the priest, people want development, people want progress and upliftment, and this desire lead them for the betterment of their life. The author wants to convey here that for any progress, desire plays a lead role, which the rag pickers lack in. The author's acquaintance with the barefoot rag pickers takes her to Simapuri. Simapuri is a place on the periphery of Delhi. Periphery means outskirts of Delhi, yet miles away from it metaphorically. Actually, Delhi is the capital of India. In Delhi, there is luxury and affluence. There are a host of opportunities and dreams. And in Simapuri, there is squalor, hopelessness, and despair. There is no chance for the inhabitants of this area to strive towards the attainment of the prospects offered by Delhi. Thus, although Simapuri is located at the periphery of Delhi, in the real sense, Delhi is as far as miles away from it. Simapuri is home to 10,000 other shoeless rag pickers like Saheb. They are all Bangladeshi refugees who came here back in 1971. They live in very poor conditions in mud structures with roofs of tin and tarpaulin. The place has no running water facility and no drainage. The rag pickers have lived here for the past 30 years, some even more, without identity, yet they have valid ration cards. And these ration cards have been provided to them by the shrewd politicians because these politicians consider them merely for their vote bank. And no other facility has been provided to them. Not having an identity does not bother them. If at the end of the day, they don't sleep with empty stomachs. They prefer to live here rather than in the fields at home, which give them no grain. Here you see that food is very important for them, and at least once in a day, if they are getting a stomach full meal, then they prefer to stay there. And they who once lived in the beautiful land of green fields and rivers are now compelled to pitch their tents wherever they find food. Children are born in them and become partners in survival. And survival in Simapuri means rag picking. Over the years, rag picking has become an art. Garbage is gold to these rag pickers. It is their only support and a means of income. Saheb tells the author that sometimes he finds a rupee, even a 10 rupee note. Anis realizes that garbage holds a different meaning to both parents and children. For parents, it is the source of their livelihood, providing them with food and shelter, and for children, it is wrapped in wonder. One winter morning, the author sees Saheb outside the fenced gate of the neighborhood club. He is watching a game of tennis. Saheb seems to be fascinated by the game. He tells the author that sometimes the guard lets him in and then he can ride the swing. The author notices that Saheb is wearing tennis shoes. Saheb tells her that someone gave them to him. The fact that some rich boy discarded the shoes because there was a hole in one of them, and this does not bother him. For Saheb, who has walked his whole life barefoot, it is like a dream come true. Here also you see that there is lack of ambition in Saheb. Though he liked the game of tennis, still he did not make any effort to play it by himself. He was satisfied merely to watch the game being played. Thus you see, lack of ambition, lack of dream was the main hurdle on the way to progress in Sahib's life, and he was not able to come out of poverty. One morning, the author sees Sahib on his way to milk booth. He is carrying a steel canister. He informs the author that now he works at the tea stall and is paid rupees 800 and all his meals. But the author feels that Sahib is not happy. His face has lost its carefree look. The steel canister seems heavier than the plastic bag. The bag was his, but the canister belongs to the owner of the tea stall. Sahib is no longer his own master. When the author saw Sahib with a tin canister on his back, her last hope was also lost. Because now Sahib was not the master of his own will, and it is very necessary for everyone to be independent to create something new. Now Sahib was working under his master, and there was no scope of his own freedom. And with the loss of freedom, there was the loss of his own vision also. On the contrary, we are going to read the second story of the chapter, where you will find the protagonist Mukesh, who is filled with ambitions. So the author is hopeful that there are some chances of improvement in the life of Mukesh. Anesh Jung is portraying Mukesh in such a manner as if he has his own free will. His desire is to break away all the shackles of tradition and follow his own dream. Mukesh insists on being his own master. He wishes to be a motor mechanic. Anesh asks him if he knows anything about cars. Mukesh replies that he would learn to drive a car. Here you see that the problem of not having any car or not knowing anything about the car is not coming on the way of his resolution. The author feels that his dream is like a mirage amidst the dusty streets of Firozabad. Mirage means illusion of any water body in the area of desert. Every second family in Firozabad is engaged in the business of bangle making. Firozabad is the center of India's glass blowing industry, where generations after generations have been involved in this business. Means here the author wants to say, if generation are involved in the business of bangle making, how this Mukesh can come out of this tradition. Now the author is telling the condition of Firozabad. The people of Firozabad involve their children in the bangle making industry without knowing that it is illegal for children to work in the glass furnaces with high temperatures in dingy cells without air and light. Means they are ignorant about the laws. And this is also the reason that they have involved their children in that industry. Out of the hot furnaces where they work day and night, often losing the brightness of their eyes, means this occupation, this business, means this is leading to their health hazards. Mukesh proudly announces that his house is being rebuilt and volunteers to take the author home. They walk down stinking lanes choked with garbage, past houses that are small and dirty constructions with wobbly doors and with no windows, where families of humans and animals coexist in a primitive state. They enter a half-built shack, one part of which is thatched with dead grass, and a frail young woman is cooking the evening meal for the whole family. She is the wife of Mukesh's elder brother. Though not much older in years, she has respect of a bahu. She veils her face when Mukesh's father enters. Mukesh's father has toiled hard all his life, first as a tailor and then as a bangle maker. Still, the poor fellow has not been able to renovate his house or send his two sons to school. All he could manage to do was to teach them what he knows about the art of bangle making. Mukesh's grandmother has seen her husband go blind with the dust from polishing the glass bangles. She believes in destiny. Can a God-given lineage ever be broken? She implies, born in the caste of bangle makers, they have seen nothing but bangles and of various colors. If you notice carefully here, you will find another reason why they are not able to come out of their poverty. You see the statement of Mukesh's grandmother. She thinks that it is the God-given lineages, means it is in their destiny to be a bangle maker, means they have taken birth in the caste of bangle makers. That's why they have to follow the same business and they cannot do anything else. So this is also one of the reasons why they are not able to progress in their life. In dark hutments, next to lines of flames of flickering oil lamps, sit boys and girls with their fathers and mothers, welding pieces of colored glass into circles of bangles. Their eyes are more adjusted to the dark than to the light outside. Though the business is so hazardous, they have become more used to the condition of poverty. Now they feel comfortable in that state only and don't feel any need to come out of it, howsoever health hazardous it is for them. Thus, they often end up losing their eyesight before they become adults. The author notices a young girl, Savita, in a dull pink dress, sitting beside an elderly woman, helping in making bangles. Her hands move like a mechanic. Anis wonders if she understands the holiness of the bangles for Indian women. The sad irony will suddenly dawn upon her. She will become a bride like the old women sitting beside her. In a voice drained of joy, the old lady tells the author that she has not enjoyed even one full meal in her entire lifetime. We wonder if Mukesh's father has achieved what many have failed to achieve in their lifetime. He has a roof over his head. The cry of not having money can be heard in every household of Firozabad. Nothing has changed over the years. Years of hardship have killed all hopes and dreams. So students, I think that one question must be arising in your mind, that the business is so hazardous and they are not able to earn the stomachful meal for themselves, and they are not able to follow any other business, then why they are compelled to do that business only? So here it is, the author is telling that it is their extreme condition of poverty that they don't have any money to invest in any other business, and whatever their forefathers and fathers are doing, they have to continue with that only. Apart from money, one needs a dream. In order to follow some other business, if you want to divert your track, you must be imaginative, and when you can be imaginative, when you are not toiling hard and when you are living in the comfort zone of your life. And these bangle makers, they are toiling so hard for earning their livelihood that they don't have any time to think about any other business. Means their imagination is not working, they are not able to see dreams in their life because of extreme condition of poverty. The author asks a group of young men to organize themselves in a cooperative, and she finds that it is also impossible for them. She learns the horrific truth that even if they get organized, they are taken to jail for doing something illegal and are beaten up. There is no leader among them. And what is the cause behind the absence of any leader in their society? The reason is that their elderly persons, they are so much exhausted that they don't have any capacity to lead them, and there is no young one, means they are also the partner in the survival, in their survival, and that's why means all of them are toiling so hard that there is no one to lead the youth. Thus the author finds two distinct words in Firozabad. One is the exploited family caught in the vortex of poverty and the stigma of the caste in which they were born. The other is a vicious cycle of those who exploit them. The sahukars, the middlemen, the politicians, the lawmakers, the policemen, and the bureaucrat. Means they, all of them are exploiting these people. These have created such a burden that a child accepts this as naturally as his father did. To do something else would mean to dare, and daring is not a part of growing up. Here the author wants to say that if you want to grow up, then you must have to dare. And these people, these poverty-stricken people, they cannot dare for anything else. The author is filled with joy when she finds that Mukesh thinks differently. The boy is filled with hope. His dream of being a motor mechanic is still alive in his eyes. He is willing to dare. Anish asks Mukesh if he also dreams of flying a plane. Mukesh replies in negative. He is content to dream of cars as few planes fly over Firozabad. Dream is must to move ahead in our life. But one thing is to be understood, that your dream must be logical. It should be rational enough to be within the axis of the dreamer. Otherwise, there are more chances of it being shattered. Mukesh is dreaming of cars only and not of aeroplanes because aeroplane is far away from his axis. To achieve any height, you must go step by step. A big leap may make you fall. That is why Mukesh says the aeroplanes don't fly in the skies of Firozabad. After reading the chapter, we have come across various reasons of poverty and exploitation. First and foremost is poverty itself. People are not able to afford basic necessities of their life. They toil so hard that further their imagination does not work. They don't have any money to invest in any other occupation. To some extent, they hold tradition responsible for their lot. Apart from it, there is lack of a strong will in them to come out of their condition as Mukesh has. Further, they are ignorant of laws. If they are aware of the laws, still, lack of any strong support compels them to lead a life of exploitation because in our country, laws are made but not forcefully implemented. Furthermore, they become so much used to the life of poverty that they feel comfortable in that state. They don't feel any need to come out of it. Their firm belief in the destiny is one more cause of their poverty. Like Mukesh's mother, they begin to think that they have been born in a certain caste, that is why they are destined to live in that type of life only. In addition to it, they have lost their ability to dream because of toiling hard. They cannot build up any organization because of the lack of a leader. The accumulative effect of all these things compel a child to bear the burden of responsibility. They accept it as naturally as their fathers. As they grow up, they become comfortable with it. Students, this chapter will also help you to write an article on child labor. Now I think the chapter is quite clear to you. If you like the explanation, please press the like button. If you are new on the channel, subscribe it, share it, and also press the notification bell on to get the latest updates. Thank you very much. See you in the next video.